talking today with Norm Lajeunesse of Kennebunkport, Maine. I almost said a former Marine. I've been told there's no such thing as a former Marine.
Yes,
Yeah,
ex-Marines.
I got that right. I got that right. Uh, Norm, welcome. I'm so glad you could join us today. This is a interview project that I've been doing for the past year or so, and we're recording the interviews, and they end up in a special file at the Library of Congress of veterans' experiences. Our first interview, believe it or not, was with a fellow who was a veteran of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. So he had quite a story to tell. Norm is from Maine, grew up in Biddeford, Maine. And Norm, give me a little bit of background on your family and how your family landed in Biddeford.
Well, I'm the son of an immigrant. My dad came in 1922 with his mom and dad and 9 siblings. They settled in Biddeford, went to work in the mills. But my dad didn't go to work in the mills. He went to work at soccer little shops. They were building machinery for the textile industry, like Pepperell and Bates. 3 of my aunts went back to Canada and never came back. They had boyfriends, and they were a little older than Dad was. My mom was born in Biddeford. My dad went to the 8th grade and then quit. My mom went to her junior year in high school and then got married. They all did well without education. Hardworking people, worked in the mills. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. Dad had a pretty good job. He became the general foreman of the foundry for soccer little shops until they closed here and moved to the Carolinas. Then it was difficult. Dad was out of work for a full year, spent all his savings. My grandmother lived with us also. But he picked himself up and got another job, and things went very well after that. I always went to parochial schools, grade 1 to grade 12, nuns and brothers. Did well in school. I was popular in school, was active in everything. Did well in high school. I was on the football team, and I think the high school that I went to, everybody was on the football team. I'm serious. We went to Vanguard. We took 2 buses in my junior year. And then I got into 3 colleges, and I selected the University of New Brunswick in Fredericton.
Yeah, sure.
And I was way too immature. I just turned 18. I went up there, and they wanted me to play football up there, and I did play football up there. And I can remember being up there. Back then, there was no 295. It was just, we took Route 1 up there. It was a 6 or 7 hour drive.
Yeah.
And I can remember feeling so lonely. I didn't know anybody at all. And then made friends. And my freshman year went very well. I did well playing football. I was a starting guard and an outside linebacker as a freshman. My second year went well, but I was not mature enough to be at the university. And I realize that now, but that's fine. It's behind me. So I left in September of 1966. And by February of 67, 5 months, I was at Parris Island.
So you enlisted in the Marines at that point?
No, I didn't enlist. I was drafted, but when we got to Portland, they said we need some volunteers for the Marine Corps, and I said if I'm going to go in the military, I'll make the most of it. So I volunteered for the Marine Corps, and you know what? I'm glad I did. I would not have said that when I was in boot camp, that I'm glad I did, but I'm glad I went through boot camp.
Well, tell me about boot camp and how that affected and changed you.
Oh my God, I thought I was a big shot. Well, they put me in my place. If I can say it, would I want to go through it again? No way. But if I had to, I would. I'm proud that I did. It taught me a lot, let me tell you. Back in those days, because Vietnam was going so strong, they had cut boot camp from, I think, 12 weeks to 10 weeks or 8 weeks. So they crammed everything that they should have done in 12 weeks into 8 weeks. It was pretty tough. If you've seen some of the scenes from Full Metal Jacket, like in the barracks, That's not exaggerated. I mean, if you screwed up, he would let you know. So from boot camp, I did well in boot camp. The secret to the Marine Corps is to keep your mouth shut and keep your eyes straight ahead. And I did that. And then from there, we graduation day, we boarded buses, and they took us to Camp Lejeune or Camp Geiger, which was infantry training. There maybe 6 or 7 more weeks. The things that I remember about Camp Geiger is they put us in a gas chamber. And I thought that should be a piece of cake, but it wasn't. One of the worst things I've ever been through, chemical warfare.
Oh, so they were getting you ready for chemical warfare.
Yes, we went through everything. Detection of booby traps, the rifle range again, grenades, firing RPGs, rockets.
Was it live? Was this live ammunition? Live?
It was. It was. But they were very, very careful. Nobody got hurt. That wasn't bad. And from there, they gave us 10 days leave, and I came home. And I was able to recruit someone, and they gave me an extra 10 days leave because I recruited someone. It was like a bonus. Sadly, this guy didn't make it through boot camp, but I get my extra 10 days. And from there, I went to Camp Pendleton in California, communication school.
Okay.
It wires, telephones, switchboards, telephone poles, how to set up communications for the battalion, whether in the rear or up front. That was fun. And from there, we went to staging battalion, which is the last thing you go through before they send you to Vietnam.
Now, wasn't there a trip home in somewhere in this period to see Pearl?
Yes, absolutely. The airlines are on strike the last time they gave me leave. And I said, I'm going home. I rented a car in San Diego. The 5 guys from the East Coast, New Jersey, New Hampshire. We drove home from San Diego. I made it home in 53 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I never said this. I got stopped in New Mexico doing 105 miles an hour.
No, I'm going to notify the New Mexico authorities right now.
No, when you hear the rest of it, you're going to say, oh, my God. He says, where the hell are you going? And he's got the light. He put the light in the car, and with 5 Marines in there, still in uniform. Our ties are off. And I said, listen, we're all Marines. We just got finished with the staging battalion. We're going home, and we're all going to Vietnam. And you know what he said? I was in the Marine Corps, too. He said, keep it under 100 until daylight, and I'll take care of the rest. So off we went. Right?
Wow, that's amazing.
Texas, I think. And you can see for miles and miles and miles. Brand new car.
Sure.
Came home.
Okay, got back, and now you didn't get married at this point, did you, or did you?
No. I would never have got married before going to Vietnam. That'd have been foolish. Some people did, and no way.
All right, so you get home. Did you drive back to Camp Pendleton, or did you fly?
The airlines are still on strike. Luckily, I went to Portsmouth. The base was open. Peace. We got a military hop to Chicago. From Chicago, we went to Denver. From Denver, we went to Seattle, and we hitchhiked back to Camp Pendleton. It took us longer to get back to Pendleton, flying to driving.
From Camp Pendleton, you headed to Vietnam. Was that by ship, by air?
Camp Pendleton, they took us all by bus to El Toro, an airbase, Marine airbase. We sat around for maybe 10 hours waiting for the aircraft to come in to pick us up. From there, we went to Okinawa, landed in Okinawa, more processing, shots, no examinations though, but we left all our military gear in Okinawa in storage. They issued us jungle uniforms, very light, unlike the irregular greens that we wore, jungle boots, but no arms. Stayed in Okinawa maybe 2 or 3 days, and then off to Vietnam. It seems that anytime you travel with the Marine Corps, you always land at night. When you go to boot camp, you arrive at night. I got there at night, checked in. Checking in was like going to Ken's to buy some fried clams. It was like a counter with open windows, and you gave him your orders, and he da 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 da. And from Da Nang, the next day or a couple of days after that, they took us to Phu Bai, which was a Ford Marine Corps base. And more not indoctrination, but more schooling and more forms to fill out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That night,
let me back up a minute. When you were on that flight and ended up in Okinawa, and when you knew very well where you were going, what were you feeling? What were you thinking? Were you nervous, worried, excited? What was the mood?
I'm glad you asked that. People didn't realize what was going on. I had never heard of Vietnam. If you had told me back when I was in high school, Vietnam, I wouldn't know what Vietnam was. Laos, nor Cambodia. My thoughts were, I'm an American. We got the tanks, we got the jets, we got the helicopters, we got the ships, we got the artillery, and we're fighting these guys that are using bayonets and bow and arrows almost. This will be over in a couple of weeks. That was my thought. I was very surprised, very, very surprised, very surprised.
So you got there, had more training, and then were sent up toward the DMZ, right?
The first place that I went to was called the Rock Pile, which was a forward base. There was half the battalion was there, and the other battalion was on patrol or doing sweeps. And I still didn't think it was that serious. They assigned me to a foxhole, or almost a bunker. We set claymore mines up and dug a hole a little bigger. There was 3 of us in that bunker. First night there, I had no idea what was going to happen. The first night there, we got mortared. And of the 3 of us in this bunker or foxhole, the other 2 guys got wounded, and they were medevacs. I'm sitting there by myself. I mean,
so you're in the bunker. The mortars are coming in, and there's not a damn thing you can do, right? I mean, you can't.
We were having our few reactions, and they come in so fast, we didn't have a chance to jump into the foxhole. 2 guys got it. Thank God that I didn't get hit. We stayed at the rock pile. They replaced these 2 guys. We stayed at the rock pile maybe a month or so. A couple of days later, they picked me to go on patrol. I'd never been on patrol. And I was a junior man. I just got there. My job was assistant to the M60 machine gun gunner. I carried the ammunition for him. We went on patrol. We engaged. We couldn't walk through the jungle because it was way too thick, and it was hot. The ground was steaming. We were using machetes to get through the jungle. Finally, we came across a stream bed, and we should never have done that. Never have done that. We walked in the stream bed, water up to my chest, and then we encountered. I didn't fire my weapon, but the machine gunner that I was carrying ammunition for did fire. And then we got lost. The hell out of it. I lost a little confidence in the lieutenant that was leading us that day, but finally we got back. Got back safely, nobody got hurt. A couple of nights later, manning the same bunker, we set up the claymore mines, one here, one there with the remotes. They picked me to go on an LP. An LP is a listening post where you go out maybe 200 yards beyond the perimeter. And you just lay in the jungle and listen and watch. You go out there with just a weapon, no flak jacket, no helmet, and you cover yourself with the poncho in the bushes, and you just wait to hear someone or to see someone. Luckily, we didn't see anybody. Nobody came across that night. And we go out with 2 flares, a red flare and a green flare. The red flare means that the enemies around us were coming in. And the green flare says everything's nice and clean, and you fire the green flare and you're coming in. After a month or so, we heard that we were going to rotate. They were going to put us afloat. The 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines were afloat. They were coming back to Vietnam, and we were going to Okinawa. So we walked from the rock pile to Fubai. I was lucky enough to climb on a Jeep because I was with headquarters in communications. And little things that I think of that happened when I was climbing up on that tank, not a Jeep, a tank, with a little ladder in the back. I had 2 grenades. One fell, it bounced on the track, and it bounced in the mud. And I'm saying, what do I do now? Am I going to tell somebody that I dropped the grenade? Nope, I didn't say a word. And then the tank ran over the grenade. Of course, the pin wasn't pulled, so nothing was going to happen. And the grenade must have sank in maybe 6 to 10, 12 inches into the mud. And we left, and then we went to Fubai. Fubai, we had nice places to live in. A friend of mine built them. Eric Lozier built them. He was a CB, and we talk about that sometimes. And from there, it was like a summer camp. Of course, we had work to do.
Before you go on, how long had you been up at the rock pile? How long was that deployment?
I think we spent maybe 3 weeks or a month at the rock pile.
Okay.
Enough. I was beginning to learn now. I was beginning to learn, and I knew. Then I really began to understand this is pretty serious. I mean, they can mortar us. We can't see them. We tried to return fire, but you couldn't see them. And then we boarded ship, went to Okinawa. The problem we had is that a Marine outfit like that's got 4 companies: Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta. We didn't have a Charlie company because they were all gone. They took what was left of Charlie company and dovetailed them with the Alpha, Bravo, and Delta because they were gone. I mean, the shit had hit the fan. Maybe
by gone, you mean killed or wounded?
Exactly, killed or wounded. So we should have 4 companies, but we only had 3. We went to Okinawa to regroup, get some new equipment, get some new recruits, and from there, we stayed in Okinawa, I would say maybe a couple of weeks. And then we sailed to the Philippines, where we had an operation in the Philippines, in the jungle in the Philippines, just to simulate what we would face in Vietnam. It was fun. I mean, there was no enemy there. We were picking coconuts out of the trees and breaking coconuts. And of course, I got the runs eating so many coconuts. And then we visited Taiwan, Taipei, and we anchored, and they took us ashore in these launches. We had liberty until midnight, had to be back on ship till midnight. Stayed 3 or 4 days there. Then back to the Philippines. We stayed in Navy housing. It was like a hotel. I mean, I thought I was at the beach. There was a swimming pool. There was a bar that opened at noontime. Having a wonderful time. And then we boarded the USS Iwo which was it's a helicopter landing amphibious ship. Boarded the Iwo and headed back to Vietnam. The Iwo had like a flight deck and then a hangar deck. The helicopters were on the hangar deck down below with big elevators. They'd bring them up every so often. They'd fly a little bit and come back. So we sailed for Vietnam, and that's when it really happened. We landed on a shore at Jilin. It was an army outpost. A lot of artillery, the big guns, the 175s. These barrels must have been 40 feet long. We landed there. We were scheduled to land in the morning, but because it was raining and foggy, we couldn't. So we finally decided to go ashore about 3 in the afternoon. The first wave was the battalion commander. Back then it was Colonel Bell. And the second wave, the last wave I was on. In the meantime, I forgot something. I had been transferred from the phones and switchboards to radios. I had knew nothing about radios, hadn't been trained, but I was just put into it. I didn't know how to turn it on. And so finally, the guy helped me to turn it on, set the frequency, hook up the handset, and off we went. I was the executive officer's radio operator. We were the last to go ashore with another command group. Finally,
did you go ashore in the helicopters or in some kind of LSTs?
Helicopters, strictly helicopters. By the time my wave went, the this was maybe 5 o'clock in the evening. The wounded were coming back. The helicopters would take us ashore and bring the wounded and dead back. The sailors were saying, "Oh my God, you're going out? You guys are going out there?" "Yeah, we're going out there."
So you were being helicoptered right into a war zone.
The DMZ was maybe 2 miles away from Geolin. We landed, and there was two operators. I was a regimental operator, and this big black kid. What a nice man he was. The story about the helmet. We landed, we dug our hole, and then the mortars and rockets and artillery started coming in. We took in 1,200 rounds that night.
Holy smoke.
It went on and on. I had been through a mortar attack like at the rock pile, but nothing like this. It started at 5 and went on till midnight. I had the midnight watch in the command bunker on the radio, and I had to crawl to it because you didn't dare stand up. The funny thing is, Bonnie heard this story. This big black guy, he says, "I got to take a piss," he says. I said, "Well, you can't get out of the hole." So he takes his helmet. He takes the steel helmet off. He keeps his soft helmet on, and he urinates in his helmet. And he's going to throw it out. He misses, and he pours it on himself. So I'm watching this, and there's got urine coming down his eyes and all over him. We laughed it off.
That was probably one of the few laughs you had in that bunker.
Very few laughs. Anyway, our job was, and maybe you've heard of it, we clear cut maybe 5 or 6 miles of jungle, clear cut where you could see 5 miles. We clear cut that. We were with the engineers. We were security for the engineers.
So did they have, was it chainsaws?
It was chainsaws. It was bulldozers. It was cut all the trees, put them to one side. We put them on the north side, the DMZ side. Cut all the trees, all the brush, and bulldoze. Where you could see 5 miles easily. Some people call that McNamara's folly. It was the most ridiculous thing. McNamara thought he could hold the North Vietnamese back by putting up the trace, they called it.
Well, I got to ask you, I got to stop you there because you mentioned McNamara. Were you guys conscious of the decisions being made in Washington and wonder who the hell was in charge or what they knew? I mean, did you have any doubts about what was going on?
We had a doubt when we started to build this strip. The plan was to put sensors and towers. The first mile was okay. The engineers put up a tower, so we advanced maybe a quarter mile a day. We dig in every night because we're a mile from the DMZ. We dig in every night to set a perimeter. The second night we looked back a mile or so, the tower's burning. The North Vietnamese had crossed the trace or the strip, and they were burning the tower. This went on for about 60 days. We'd advance, I don't know, eighth of a mile maybe, dig in. The guys that had it the worst were the bulldozer operators because they were wearing flak jackets and the helmet, and they couldn't hear anything. And it was hot. It was hot in those cabs. And if they were getting sniper fire, they had no idea. They couldn't hear anything. We clear cut that. It took us 60 days to get to Con Thien.
Now wasn't the clearing projects where Agent Orange came in sometimes?
Exactly. We'd advance. They used Agent Orange, and within 3 or 4 days, it was like fall in Maine, no leaves. There's no green, and we didn't know any better. When we'd stop for the night and dig our foxholes and set up for the night with the mines, Claymore mines, we'd gather leaves, all right, lay the poncho down, fold the poncho, and the leaves were the pillow for the night. So you laid on a poncho with the pillow made of leaves that have just been killed by Agent Orange.
Wow.
You get up in the morning, sea ration cans, any metal, we'd have to bury, leave it in the foxholes because the North Vietnamese were very good at improvising. They could use anything and make a weapon out of it. Finally, we got to Con Thien, and I felt so safe at Con Thien with concertina wire, 3 layers of it. The North Vietnamese really wanted Con Thien. If you read about it, they really wanted it. And people were saying this could be the next Dinh Dinh Phu. But we wouldn't give it up. No way, we wouldn't give it up. And so I felt really comfortable out there. We set claymore mines, and we had machine gun emplacements. We had 3 or 4 tanks, Ontos, 105 recoilless, a good perimeter, good bunkers. You know, I remember the dates very, very well because my birthday's coming up. On May 6th, I was an operator
May 6th of 67.
of 67. I was a radio operator, and I had worked my way to us. I knew my stuff, and I was good at it. I could operate a radio and tell you something in 3 words that it would take someone else 5 minutes, like radio checks. I would just click my handset, Bravo 5, and Bravo would say 5 by 5. That's all that needed to be said. 5 was clarity and volume. I would have to check every line company, like every hour, to make sure communications were up. On the 6th of May, I remember well, Sergeant DeSanio comes up on a covered circuit. I didn't have the clearance to operate, to set up that radio, but I had the clearance to operate it. And he's talking to the colonel first, Colonel Ted Willis. Then he talks to me. You know, Ted Willis wasn't there. Ted Willis was back in the rear because I followed the next day. He says, I want you back in the rear, Corporal. I wasn't a corporal yet, I was a Lance Corporal. I said, why? I like it here. I'm doing a good job. You're doing an excellent job. That's why I want you back in the rear with us. And I fought it. I didn't want to go back. So I did go back. And when I got back, he said, I got a care package from your folks. What I liked the best was those red maraschino cherries. Oh, I love those. My folks would send me that. Steel wool, paper towels, all kinds of stuff. I got a package for you, and I'm promoting you today to corporal. I'm now a junior NCO. And also, he said, Bill Baker, who was a corporal, he was the commanding officer of the radio operator. So well respected Bill was. Everybody liked him. He was so good at his job. And so they gave me that job. It wasn't a promotion. It was an honor to be named the battalion commander's radio operator. As the battalion commander's operator, if Colonel Willis goes to the bathroom, I go with him because I've got that handset and I've got the communications. If he takes a shower, I don't go in the shower. I stand outside with the radio. If he's having lunch or eating sea rations, I'm with him eating sea rations. When he lays down for the night, I lay down next to him with the radio because the radios will wake me up. So they wanted me to go back, and I went back, and I didn't want to go back. I wanted to stay at Con Thien because I felt safe. And the Marine Corps is funny. They just push and push and push. Discipline. And it wasn't like that at Con Thien. It was just man your bunker, keep the area clean, but get ready for the night because we don't know what's going to happen.
So did you go back to Con Thien?
Yeah, well, I get to Dong Ha. That's where the rear was, Dong Ha. And Corporal Bristol is also going home, and he meets me at the landing pad. He takes me to the communications tent, and he says, this is where you're going to stay. He said, that's my bunk. I don't use my bunk. I said, where are you staying? Look underneath. He had dug a foxhole under his bed, under the bunk, because he was going home the next day. And he said, I'd be goddamn if I'm going to take a chance and get mortared tonight, my last day. We get mortared. I got half a chance. I'm in there. Okay. So I lay down trying to sleep, and I did fall asleep. 3 o'clock in the morning, about 3:30, Corporal Bristol's got the watch that night, just walking around the tents. He wakes me up at 3:30 in the morning. He says, Norm, he says, saddle up. Saddle up is a term they use in the Marine Corps. Get your rifle, get your gun belt, get your canteens, your first aid kit, your pack. You're going out. I said, at 3 o'clock in the morning, you crazy? The Con Thien is being overrun right now. They're in the compound. And the old man, Ted Willis, the colonel, wants to get out there. So I meet, they had a Jeep pick me up. I felt like a big deal. Somebody picks me up in a Jeep. They take me to the landing zone. We get on this helicopter, probably a 15-minute flight to Con Thien. It's still dark. This is like 4 o'clock in the morning. As we approach it, it was like going to the fireworks on Eastern Prom in Portland. The sky is lit. The sky is freaking lit. They didn't have illumination the first couple hours of the fight, but finally they were able to shoot illumination with artillery from GLN. The sky is lit. Smoke, unbelievable smoke. And you can see small arms fire. I step out of the helicopter. First thing I do is I take my little antenna off, my little Venetian blind antenna off, and I put the whip on. The whip is a 6-foot antenna. It's like a telescope. And I put that on, and I walk back to the helicopter to help the colonel get off the helicopter because it's quite high. He's an old man. He's 40, and I'm 20. So I got to help the old guy. I walk into the rotor of the antenna with the rotor of the helicopter with my antenna, and it's gone. My boss, the radio chief, comes running over, starts to chew me a new asshole for doing that. And I can remember very, very well. Colonel Ted Willis, I had spoken to him. He goes over to the staff side. He says, "You leave him alone." He answers to nobody but me. "You leave him alone." He gave the staff side an ass chewing like you wouldn't believe. So the fight ended maybe 11 o'clock in the morning. The funny thing is, funny, that's not the correct word. We had an ambush set out. The ambush never picked the North Vietnamese coming in. We had maybe 500 or 600 people on our hill, and they hit us with the full regiment. Oh, God, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 of them. Wow. We held them. They got into the compound. It was just devastating.
Well, did it get to hand-to-hand fighting at that point?
It did. Delta Company was hand-to-hand on the north side. Delta Company, the commander was Captain Jewell. Nicest guy in the world. We had some bad officers. I'll tell you, we had some bad officers. Some of them surprised didn't get fragged. Maybe they did get fragged after I left. So when it's
let me stop you there, because not that many people have experienced that level of combat. What was in your head? I mean, was it just thinking about surviving, thinking about your buddies? What kept you going?
You don't think. You do what you have to do. You don't think. You just do what you have to do. Whether it's, I don't know, you do what you have to do. But the hand-to-hand combat was all done. The North Vietnamese were gone. When they retreated, they sprung the ambush that should have sprung when they came in. And the guy that was leading the ambush, of course, reported to the battalion commander, Colonel Willis. And I was there when he debriefed Colonel Willis. He said they were coming 50, 60 at a time. He says, we were sitting there and right coming through the ambush. He said, we were like shooting ducks in a pond. He says, I don't know how many we got, but you think about that. You're taking human lives. I don't care if they're Asian, and taking pride in shooting and killing hundreds of people. Anyway, once the dust is settled, the colonel wants to walk the perimeter, and we walked the perimeter to check how much damage. When we got to Delta Company, Captain Jewell is in his bunker. He's got bullet holes in both legs. He's got a Coleman working on him, but he's got his 45. He's waiting for another fight. So we finished walking part of the perimeter, and General Lewis Wald flew in with his bodyguard and his assistants. They land, and we meet him, Colonel Willis and I and another guy. We meet the general. General's a 4-star general. He is the Marine general, the best of the nicest one in the Marine Corps. And the colonel starts to debrief him, and now we get mortared again. I didn't get hurt. The colonel didn't get hit. Captain Lee, who was General Walt's bodyguard, got hit in the face. I mean, that freaking gas was. So he just shook it off, and we called for a corner, and we managed it up. We finished the perimeter, and General Walt leaves, and he's going back to Da Nang headquarters. Now, people weren't thinking. We lost 44 Marines that night. 125 wounded, but we killed 200 North Vietnamese. Actual count, we counted them. The place was littered with arms and legs and bodies, and it was just incredible. One thing I forgot, on the way down to check the perimeter, our first stop was, there was a young North Vietnamese soldier in full uniform. They didn't have flak jackets. They didn't have helmets. They had soft caps. They had like sneakers instead of boots. And this kid's he's torn up at the crotch. I mean, it's wide open, but he's so alive and he's crying. When he sees us approach, they would have done it. He thinks that he thinks that we're going to execute him. And no, we're not going to do that. No way am I going to shoot. He goes like this here. And I caught on right away. He wants a cigarette. So I get down on my knees and I light the cigarette and put it in his mouth. He takes a couple of puffs off a Pall Mall. And then he wants water, so I take a canteen and I fill his mouth with water. And he dies. And so we leave. Now the thing is, we're short 44 KIAs. We're short 125 wounded. If they come back tonight, it's over. They're going to take the hill.
How many of you were left?
We probably manned that hill with 600 people. I'm saying 125 wounded. When I got wounded, I could have stayed, but you didn't take a chance. Out of 600 or 700, maybe 450. But then the general had called in for reinforcements. So the helicopters started to come in, helicopter after helicopter. 1st Battalion, 26 Marines sent 3 or 4 platoons. The 9th Marines sent people. Even the Army sent people. So we set up the perimeter again that night. But nothing happened. We stayed at Con Thien. I stayed at Con Thien. On the 12th, the colonel and I and the driver, we used the Jeep this time. I forgot to mention that we got all these bodies, 190 North Vietnamese bodies to get rid of. We're certainly not going to call North Vietnam and say, send some people down here. We dug a trench. We had a bulldozer, dug a trench, maybe 10 feet wide, 100 feet long, 10 feet deep. And the grunts, the infantry people, would go around, and we had Jeeps, and we had what they called a mule, a little low bed in trucks. Just throw bodies, get to the trench and just throw them in. Some were arms, legs, maybe just the head. Just fill the trench, get rid of all the bodies we can, and cover that. And then we set up for the night. Nothing happens. On the 12th of May, people would think that I'm the battalion commander's radio operator. A real cushy job, because I'm with the boss. On the 12th of May, we're checking the perimeter again. We're in a Jeep this time because everything's pretty well cleaned up. We've been reinforced. We're going down an incline, and there's no place to go. The mortars start to come in within 10, 12 feet of the Jeep. We jump out of the Jeep. We all got hit. I got hit. The colonel got hit. The driver got hit. The colonel was wounded 3 times. From April 24th to May 12th, he was wounded 3 times. He was a Marine with the troops. We all got medevac. And I can remember the first medevac helicopter that left was shot out of the sky. I don't know if it was a SAM missile, come down in flames, and they're loading me and the colonel on the second helicopter, and we're leaving. I'm saying, oh, Christ.
So you're about to get on a second helicopter when you saw the first one go down.
Yeah, yes.
Wow.
I'm being medevaced to Dong Ha. We get to Dong Ha, it was like watching MASH. People running around. The ambulance lands on the LZ. There's two ambulances. My helicopter's got, there's 4 or 5 of us wounded. I've just got shrapnel in my hand and legs. I'm not bad. I get out and I walk out. But I insist they put me on a stretcher. We get to this field hospital. And they have to remove the shrapnel because what they were doing is they would take their mortar rounds and soak them in human waste.
To make them poisonous.
Exactly. And if you got hit by one that had been soaked, you'd get infected because it was 90, 95 degrees there. They had to take that piece of metal out, about the size of a dime, if I remember correctly. And it's quite deep. It was lodged between the bones. Fuck, did that hurt? They had 2 Navy nurses hold me down. No anesthetic. They didn't have time because the wounded are coming in. He pulled it out. I thought it was vice grips.
This sounds like accounts of the Civil War.
Well, what are you going to do? I mean, this was a tent.
Yeah.
With just not even beds, but examined.
No anesthetic. Just a couple of guys holding you down. You biting something.
Didn't have time to wait because I was not badly wounded. Some people were. The colonel had a gap on his buttocks, maybe 6 or 8 inches long, maybe an inch wide. I guess he was in deep shit. And the driver had one on his arm, but I was fine. So they took care of these guys and stitched me up and sent me on my way with instructions to come back every day for 4 days for tetanus shots and all kinds of shots. After 4 or 5 days, I was supposed to go back and get the stitches out. And I borrowed a pair of dice, like cutting pliers, from someone in Hawaii, and I cut them off myself. And I did, and bandaged it myself. And said, I'm ready to go back. And I went back to Con Thien. Took the stitches out myself there.
Wow.
I was 21 years old, you know.
Was there another attack after you got back?
Nope. We left Con Thien on foot. Been replaced by the 9th Marines. And guys, we had an army battalion there also. And we had people from Australia with us. We had ROC Marines, Republic of Korea Marines. We didn't fool those guys. They never smiled even. They didn't say hello. They were serious. They hated the Vietnamese with a passion.
These were South Vietnamese troops.
All Vietnamese Marines, tough guys. They would snoop and poop, and you didn't even see them coming. First thing you knew, they were behind you. We went back to Dong Ha. From Dong Ha, I went to Camp Clark, Camp Carroll, which was a forward artillery base. By this time, I had only 5 months to go. And I was put in charge of the radio operators as an E4, just a junior NCO, because the guy that chewed my ass off when I broke his antenna at Con Thien got drunk one night and misfired his weapon. And they court-martialed him and sent us home. That's one thing you didn't do, get drunk.
Now I want to interrupt a little because we're running out of time, and I want to hear about when you got back to the U.S. and the VA and those kinds of things.
I got back to the VA. I wanted nothing to do with the VA. I was able to put everything behind me. I did. Like the only guy that came to see me knew that I was back was a guy named Norman Lajeunesse, married to Nancy, and I think Bonnie knows them. He came over one night and hugged me. He said, I'm glad you're back. And in one piece, I wore my uniform back proudly, but it was like I had been away on vacation. People didn't care. That didn't bother me until maybe when all the kids garage graduated, and I had more time to think, and then it got to me. I had a problem with alcohol. Got in trouble over that. But I've achieved a fair level of success, even putting that stuff behind me. I pride myself in that. You've met my oldest son, Ross. He talked to you when he ran. He tried to
Yeah.
get the information.
Yeah, he worked out in California, and then I met him here. He's a very impressive young man. You should be proud of him.
I've had the honor and privilege of going to 3 Ivy League graduations: Dartmouth, Harvard, and Columbia. All my kids have masters.
Amazing.
And the one that set me over the top regards an addiction, dependency. My second boy, Casey, was the regimental commander of Maine Maritime Academy. And he was the #1 midshipman up there. Picked up by Chevron right away, promoted. He resigned and went to Boston University and got a dual master's degree, a master's in information systems and a master's in business. Was promoted again, went on vacation, met a friend in South Africa that had worked for him, went on a shark diving expedition. The boat was hit by a rogue wave and he drowned.
Oh,
He drowned in South Africa. And I love my kids all the same, but I had more in common with Casey, and I never got over that. But life's been good. Life's been good. And you might be thinking, would you do it over again? Absolutely. Would I want to go back to boot camp? No. It was tough.
You'd probably want what you got out of it, but you wouldn't want to go through.
I relish what I got out of boot camp. I only got beat on once. You know what I did? I was standing at attention, and they were beating on somebody, and I went like this here. And that son of a bitch of a DI had eyes in the back of his head. He saw me do this here. Then it was my turn. I put the black gloves on him. Wham. Eyes straight ahead. Maggot. That's the only time I got beat on.
Did it prepare you for what you encountered in Vietnam?
Absolutely. The DIs kept saying, "You're gonna have some." I thought we'd win this war in a matter of weeks or a year at the most. But the DIs and instructors kept saying, "You're gonna have some downtime, some dead time. If you're in the field, improve your position, fill sandbags, protect yourself, improve your position." And that's what I did. I never took any slack time, just loafing around. I always made my position more comfortable for me and whoever I was with, and I paid attention. A lot of guys didn't. We started to have a drug problem a couple of months before I left. I had a guy show up on my watch, and I was assigning people to the watches. A guy named Bill Hitchcock. I should have showed up on my watch. I had the 8 to midnight watch in the bunker. He shows up at midnight. He's drunk. We're in Vietnam, in I Corps, with the perimeter, Claymore mines set up, machine gun emplacements, and he's drunk. He's gonna handle my radio to talk to the infantry that's protecting us. I never said a word to anybody, not even my boss. I said, "Go back and sleep it off." So I took his watch, so he wouldn't get in trouble.
Now,
I
Norm, have you told these stories all your life, or have you only recently opened up about this experience?
I've only recently started to talk about it. Nobody. I'm private. I don't like recognition. I'm not doing. Bonnie will attest to that. I've done a lot of good things.
Well, you won a lot of medals and a lot of awards, Purple Heart, and
Yeah, I got 5 or 6 more. But I always thought that if I tell my story, the way I've told you, people might think I'm looking for sympathy, and I'm not. War as hell, I don't care. Bonnie's father parachuted behind enemy lines. I wouldn't have the nerve to do that, but if you asked me to do it, I would. About being boisterous or looking for sympathy, and that's not the case. I did what I did, and I did the best I could. And I would do it all over again. Same thing.
Now, I have a friend who was in Vietnam for a couple of tours. He said when you get into that combat situation, what's motivating you is your buddies. You
Exactly.
you don't want to let them down. You don't want to feel like you're a coward.
Like, we had 44 dead people at Con Thien. Not a one was left there. Every one of those bags went out that night by helicopter. I don't care if they were there at 8 o'clock at night. Our dead people left that night. We were not leaving anybody behind.
So a lot of the motivation is for your mates.
Yes. I talk to Marines, and there's a bond. There's a bond between Marines that no other branch has. And I think it's boot camp, the way they rough you up in boot camp. If you can get through boot camp, you can go through most anything. There's a bond there, and you protect your buddy's back. You protect his back. He takes care of you, and you take care of him. And it's been like that since they.
Now let me bring you up close to the present. What's been your experience in Maine with the VA, with TOGAS, with the healthcare system? Have you feel like you've got good treatment?
I didn't want to do that. And someone talked me into it, insisted that I take advantage of it. And then a gentleman came in who was a Vietnam veteran. He was a master sergeant in the Army, E9, the highest you can go, all kinds of medals. And when he found out that I wasn't with the VA, he brought in the application himself and had me sign it. He brought it into the VA, and they called me within a couple of days. They looked at my record that I'd been wounded, and I've been with the VA maybe 15 years now. I can't say enough good about them. I can't say enough good about them. I've taken some counseling, mental counseling, because of my dependency. I have prostate cancer because of Agent Orange. They've been so good to me. I took 43 radiation treatments when it was diagnosed. It was too late to remove it. I'm still on hormone shots. I'm in year 11 now with that. They've been excellent. Excellent. If something was to happen today, I just make a phone call and they return my call. I don't know if that's because they look at my record, if they treat everybody the same. But the first time I interviewed with a guy at the VA, the simple questions were, who were you with? The 1st Battalion, 4th Marines, 3rd Division. What corps were you in? I said, I was in I Corps. And he said, all right. He said, I know exactly what you did and where you went and what happened. And it stayed at that. He knew much more about me than anybody else did. Some of the stories I told you today, my kids have never heard it. My wife's never heard it. A funny thing, I got to tell you this. At the rock pile, when I was on this listening post, 3 of us, I felt something on my crotch. Something crawling. I take my pants down, it's dark as hell. And I reach down, I pick up this thing. It's a leech. It must have been the size of a white owl cigar. The thing must have been this long and this big. He was big because he was full of blood. He'd been sucking my blood for maybe an hour, and I didn't feel it. So you had to worry about leeches crawling all over you in the jungle. You could see monkeys sometimes. Guys were shooting monkeys. Fucking stupid.
Well, Norm, listen, we could talk all day, but you've really shared a lot. This is an amazing story, and you kept your good humor. I know there've been good times. I know Pearl has been a big part of your life. I love the story of driving 50 hours back to see her.
Diego had a bit of a brand new car. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I think I won't tell the New Mexico police about that 105 mile an hour.
The regrets that I do have, is because of my dependency problem, and I've hurt the people that I cherish the most because of that. But I go to meetings once a week, and I take another Marine who's got a problem. He was in Iraq. He was a gunner. He had a problem with the same dependency problem. And we go to meetings every Sunday morning, It's a men's meeting in Kennebunk. Nothing is held back. You'd be amazed at how many veterans have a problem with that. Especially Vietnam veterans have a problem with dependency on, not in my case, not drugs, but on drugs and alcohol. But the VA's been excellent, just excellent.
Well,
VA.
the thing I'm hearing is that if you have that kind of a problem, you got to reach out. You got to, and it sounds like that group is helping.
Oh, it is. It is. In the beginning, I had an accident and I never had a parking ticket and I got an OUI. Can you imagine that? And I crashed the truck and then I said, I got to do something. So I called the VA. I took dependency counseling. I took all kinds of counseling, intensive outpatient program, and I wasn't happy with that. I took another counseling session here at the Central Maine Medical Center with the mental department here. And I used to go to meetings every day, but I'm doing much better. Like I say, the only regret is I've hurt my family. And that's,
Well, you've got a great family. I know Ross, and it sounds like, I mean, what you've achieved through those kids, where they've ended up is pretty impressive. And Norm, I can't thank you enough. This has been a wonderful hour, and you can be assured that your story is going to be preserved at the Library of Congress. People are going to experience it, learn from it, gain from it, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time.
I was very concerned. You know, I think so highly of you. I was very concerned that I would fall apart here, and I did a couple of times. But I didn't sugarcoat anything, and I was perfectly honest, even with my dependency. I didn't have to tell you about that problem, but I chose to do it because these kids that came back from Afghanistan and Iraq, they've got the same problem. They've got the same problem.
And the message is ask for help.
I didn't want to. I didn't want to. No way. I didn't ask for help until I crashed a brand new truck and got arrested. But after I had to write to the judge and told him some of my experiences, and what they did is they didn't charge me with an OUI. They dismissed it and charged me with driving to endanger.
Was that Judge Douglas by any chance?
I beg your pardon?
Was that Judge Douglas by any chance?
It was Judge, I think it was Mike. Come on, Mike. Mike Cantor was the judge.
Oh, Mike Cantari, sure.
Yeah, I know Mike. And I'm so ashamed that Mike would see what I'd done. So ashamed. Yeah.
Well, you certainly don't have anything to be ashamed of now. Norm, thanks a lot, and keep in touch. Let me know if there are any more medals we have to.
I hope you run again.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm doing it, and I'm going. Thank you, sir. Good to see you.
Good to see you.